Welcome to VikeFans.com's exclusive series, Jay's All-Out-Blitz, a look inside the key challenges and issues facing NFL players and the Minnesota Vikings in 2013. And now, your host, former NFL linebacker, Jay Foreman.
Welcome, everyone, to our September 20th edition of Jay Foreman's All-Out-Blitz series. I'm Tom Moore, and I'm joined by former NFL linebacker Jay Foreman. At Jay, the Vikings almost pulled off a road win in Chicago on Sunday. They struggled again on defense to stop the Bears early in the game, and specifically on the last drive of the game. To the casual fan, the linebackers appear to be the weak link, but Twitter comments from some of the Viking defensive players seem to indicate that there may have been a scheme problem. What did you see?
I saw a little bit of both. I mean, Chad Greenway has always played well over the years, and he's playing pretty decent this year. I think the loss late in the preseason, Kevin Williams really hurt how the middle linebacker was playing, which is obviously Aaron Henderson. I think he's still a work in progress. Obviously, with Mitchell, I think that was, I would say a project or a player playing that maybe was a little bit over their head. So I think it's a continuity thing as far as the linebackers, and I think as far as the defensive scheme-wise, again, it was just very vanilla. It's always been very vanilla. But the Vikings have been able to get away with a very vanilla defensive scheme because they've been so dominant up front with their pass rush and D-line play, which is still playing pretty good, but obviously not playing at the high level that they're used to, but mainly just because Kevin Williams is banged up off of the cheap shot that he received from a 49er player in the preseason. So I think you lose games like that late, everybody's looking for an immediate answer. I mean, granted, there might have been some calls in that last drive that were repetitive, which led to, easy throws, and maybe they weren't mixing it up as they were earlier in the game. But there was things that led to the game being so close for them to drive to win the game that went unnoticed. So I think a little bit of both, but I think it's just more frustration and players boiling over to where they're looking for immediate answers because, let's face it, they're 0-2, didn't expect to be where they're at, and they're struggling at times on both sides of the ball, so they need to get it started here really quickly with a full game and a full team win.
Well, several players after the game indicated to the media, and they actually went on Twitter and said this as well, that the final defensive play of the game, they hadn't even practiced during the week. How much does that surprise you?
That's very surprising, just because I don't think any coaches go into the game and call any calls that they haven't practiced. So I think when that call came in, that doesn't breed an air of confidence with the defensive players. And obviously, let's face it, when you're not confident, you're not going to play well and not play aggressive, and that's obviously what happened. I'm very surprised that the players did mention that, just because, as a player, you never want a coach to throw you underneath the bus, and as a coach, you never want players to throw you underneath the bus. So that's something that could be an issue later on down the season as far as if there's a strike between the players and coaches. But I think now everybody just needs to back down the action and play together and try to win the game.
Yeah, well, I'm going to ask you a scheme question because I know you'll know it, but the Vikings have run some version of the Tampa 2 defense for about the past 8 years, yet we continue to see teams just pick us apart underneath. Can you tell us from your perspective, what are the strengths and weaknesses of the Tampa 2, and is it an outdated system, or are the Vikings just not playing it correctly?
Well, the position that makes the Tampa 2 go is the middle linebacker position, the D-line and the middle linebacker position, but the middle linebacker, as far as coverages, makes the defense go, because you have to have a linebacker that has tremendous amount of range to be able to run down the middle with a fast tight end, like in this day and age of NFL football, or a slot receiver, like in Austin, or any of these great slot receivers that they have, as far as Green Bay, like with Cobb. That's what really makes it go. The weaknesses of the Tampa 2 could be in the run game, just because you have a middle linebacker that has to play pass first, because they have such a hard responsibility in the pass game. Is going to make them a little bit soft in the run game. And then obviously you're only going to be playing with 7 guys in the box, and essentially with the middle linebacker playing soft, it's actually 6.5 guys in the box. So then therefore it could expose you to the run. What really also makes the Tampa 2 defense go is being able to tackle in space. So you want to force the quarterback to check down the ball and have 2 linebackers rally from both sides of whoever's receiving, whether it's a tight end or a running back or a fullback, and making a tackle and make them drive on you methodically down the field by making you miss tackles in open field, then obviously executing at a high rate for 80 yards. And that's what the Tampa 2 is meant for. It's a great pass coverage defense, and it does pretty well against the run when you have a dominant defensive line like the Vikings has always had.
Well, on the other side of the ball, the offense sputtered again in the first half against the Bears, and Ponder was still inconsistent, but there were improvements in the second half. Did you see signs that the passing game is making strides last week?
I saw a little bit. I'm very surprised, to be honest, with the play of Christian Ponder. He hasn't taken a huge step that you would think he would need in this year, because you have the best running back in the league, and obviously the league MVP in Adrian Peterson. You have Rudolph and Carlson at tight end. You have Jennings. Then you have Patterson. And then you have Simpson at receiver. That's a pretty good offensive skill position group, and then they go along with a pretty good offensive line. I'm really surprised that he hasn't really taken a huge step, but I thought I saw some improvement from him in that second half. That's something that he can build on personally, and then also as a team, and in particular, an offensive team, from the scheme concept and also a confidence concept to where they can improve on that and then also build on that. So I look for them this week to have a better offensive performance, and better yet, a more consistent offensive performance in the first, second, third, and fourth quarter versus taking the whole half off and then trying to get the game rolling in the third and fourth quarter.
Well, for armchair quarterbacks like me, we struggle on the offense to figure out why the offensive coordinator, Bill Musgrave, has all but eliminated plays like end-arounds, reverses, screen passes, flea flickers, and even slant patterns. So it remains a really bland scheme that we've talked about before. It doesn't take advantage of the explosive players that are on the Viking squad. Why would we not want to use these options?
Well, that's the million-dollar question. I don't think it's something that they don't want to use the options. I think Bill Musgrave is still trying to build that confidence and see what he has in Christian Ponder. I really do. I really think that they're trying to bring him along slowly. I think that they really fell in love with the running attack of what they had with Adrian Peterson, but really I think they maybe pushed their chips in too quickly to think that they're going to be able to rush for that amount of yards in a back-to-back season like that. Regardless, Adrian Peterson is always going to be in shape and ready to play, but teams are not keying for that because they're not scared of Christian Ponder, and Christian Ponder isn't passing very well. So I think it's a catch-22 for him where he doesn't want to give Christian Ponder too much and ruin his confidence, but then also he has to do more because teams are starting to key on Adrian Peterson, even though he's rushing right around 100 yards a game, which is obviously very, very good in the NFL today.
Well, after playing just 6 plays in the opener, explosive Cordarrelle Patterson ran the opening kickoff back 105 yards for a score last week, but then he played just 5 more offensive plays all day against the Bears. After the game, Frazier said Patterson's lack of playing time was an oversight that would be corrected this week. Why wouldn't an issue like this be resolved in the game plan before the game actually started?
Well, that's another good question, and that makes you think that I don't see how you have a first-round pick with that type of size, speed, and ability, and especially after he returns the first kick for a touchdown, that is going to be an oversight. I just wonder what really goes into the thought process as far as the game plan. So you're not trying to use all your weapons. I mean, he's a guy that, even if he doesn't know the whole playbook, that you want to give him 10 or 15 plays that he knows, but then those end-around plays, those quick screens, those bubble screens, those are things that he can run in his sleep because they're not hard plays. He doesn't have to worry about reading coverages. He doesn't have to worry about blocking schemes in the run game. He's just taking a step or two forward, getting the ball, and actually he's doing the same things that he did on the first play of the game, which is return a kick and act as like a returner or a punt returner or a kick returner, making people miss, and then taking a 2 or 3 yard pass and turn it into a 30-yard game. So it's going to be interesting to see how this evolves, not only for him personally, Cordarrelle Patterson, but then also for the offense, because this is something that once the offense gets started and starts scoring some more points consistently, it's going to lead to the defense even playing even better, because we have one of the best pass rushing defensive lines in the NFL, but we can't take advantage of it right now because we're either playing to an even scored game or we're playing behind, and that's not what you want to do when you're trying to go out and sack the quarterback.
Well, clearly we're going to see something from Patterson this week with Frazier proactively addressing it, so we will see more, so we'll see what the results are. Well, Jay, the Browns come to town starting a third-string quarterback in Brian Hoyer and having traded their best running back in Trent Richardson to Indianapolis this week. Are the Browns waving the white flag this early, and is it harder for the Vikings to prepare for the unknowns on their offense?
I think the Browns, I don't know how they would be able to convince me that they're not waving the white flag after week 2, which is very, very surprising considering that they had a pretty good offseason as far as signing some free agents. Had a pretty good draft, actually, and had a pretty good draft the last 2 or 3 years. They're just a young team. For them to go out and and trade the numbers we picked from the draft before, somebody that you gave $14 million in the signing bonus, to it's actually another AFC team, an Indianapolis Colts, an up-and-coming team that's looking to make a playoff run themselves. It was very surprising considering that what they get back, they're going to get the virtual unknown from a pick from 16 to 32 that might not even make an impression. Trent Richardson was pretty productive when healthy and playing. So that was very surprising. But as far as preparing for Hoyer as a quarterback and what to expect from the Cleveland Browns, I would have probably expected very minimal. He was just 2 weeks ago the third-string quarterback, and now he's going to be thrust into the starting lineup. And for you fans out there, when you're the backup quarterback or the third-team quarterback, you're not doing anything during the week as far as with the starters on offense. You're running a lot of scout team plays. So for this guy to go from running other teams' plays to trying to grasp the whole Cleveland Browns playbook is a very, very tall task. And actually, it works out better for the Vikings. They're ripe for the picking as far as to go and get some sacks and actually get some turnovers and hopefully some interceptions, return for touchdowns. Just because this guy he's never been a starter. He's not an established player. And here he is. He's going to play against one of the top defenses in their home opener. It's very, very sitting right there for the Vikings to take advantage of.
I'll tell you what, when you're 0-2, you'll take any advantage you can get.
Yeah, that's right.
Well, elsewhere in the NFL, I wanted to get your thoughts on Seattle's domination of the 49ers last Sunday night. Was this a changing of the guard in the NFC West, or are you expecting more out of the 49ers as we move forward?
I think, Seattle caught the 49ers at the perfect time. The 49ers had played a very physical and intense game against a Green Bay team that had been gunning for that game all offseason. It was a shootout, but it was a very physical game, and then to turn around on a short week, or actually on a regular week and play Sunday night up in Seattle in their home opener, every arrow was pointing for Seattle to have that type of victory and to play that well. I don't really see it as a change of a guard until the Seattle goes to the 49ers and it performs the same way. Then I would say that, Seattle just held court. It's also going to be interesting to see how Seattle plays on the road, because let's face it, last year they did not perform well on the road. And when they start performing well on the road and winning more on the road, then you'll see them more in the names that you start talking about as far as the legit Super Bowl contenders. Because if they don't win the division and don't have the top one or two seeds, they won't be able to make it that far in the playoffs. So, it's only the first 2 weeks as far as the Seattle, but they played really, really well. But I'm still going to hold my breath a little bit until they're at as far as being the change of guard, because San Francisco, I think, is overall a better team.
And when you looked at Colin Kaepernick, he had a really uncharacteristic turnover-laden game. Did the Seahawks find something in his game that others can take advantage of, or do you think that's just a one-game situation?
I think it's a one-game situation. I think the Seahawks were playing at a high level. They got up, and the 49ers offense stubbed their foot a few times. They had a couple good drives going, and they turned the ball over. So I think that once Seattle got up and their pass rushes improved through free agency with Cliff Averill coming over from Detroit, they've done a pretty good job in getting after the quarterback, and they have some big corners that can cover. And plus, it's a rivalry game. I think that they went out and played well, and I was very surprised to see Kaepernick struggle as much as he did, just because he's shown the ability to take over a game with his feet and create with his feet that leads to big pass plays. He looked like he was stuck in neutral, and he looked like he was a little bit dumbfounded, and I didn't see that in any of his starts last year. So that was very interesting to see how he handled that type of pressure playing up in Seattle. But he was a starter from the middle of the season last year, so where he doesn't have a full season underneath his belt yet, and so he's still learning himself. So that's how I think it was just a learning process for him. And we'll see how he recovers this week and plays this week against Indianapolis.
Well, this week down in Florida, there have been several fan rallies at the Jacksonville Jaguar complex, with fans urging Jaguar management to sign Tim Tebow. While this would be a popular move for the fan base, how does such a move, if it happens, affect the team?
Well, I think when you bring in a guy like Tim Tebow, he's going to bring the fanfare, because he is from Jacksonville area. Obviously played at Florida, Heisman Trophy winner. Everybody really loves Tim Tebow, regardless of what they think about him personally. I just think that the guys, will look at him as just another guy, and they'll be interested to see what he can do. My honest opinion is Tim Tebow is not an NFL quarterback, and I hate to say that about any player, because he never wants to crush anybody's NFL dreams, but he's tried to play quarterback long enough. His skill set is just not built for the NFL game. If I was to advise Tim Tebow, I would advise him to go to Canada and get as many passing reps as he can, work on his craft with the least amount of pressure, and then in a year or two come back to the NFL and have a legitimate chance, because his intangibles are off the charts. Winning the games, being a good leader, but his skill set is so far behind, and for him not to be on the roster and not getting those practice reps and those game reps is really going to hurt his game in the long run.
Well, in Washington, the 0-2 Redskins are giving up a ton of yards and points, and although RG3 is putting up a lot of yards himself, he clearly is not the same player as last year after his ACL surgery. His mechanics appear to be off, and he also seems to be favoring his plant foot. Should he be in the starting lineup this soon?
Well, yeah, I mean, he is the franchise. He's the franchise not only of the Washington Redskins, but he's one of the guys that's the face of the NFL. He is healthy, and he needs these reps in order to work through all the mechanical issues and the confidence issues that he's having in his leg. Yes, he's playing a little bit different. Yes, he's not driving off that back leg as he once did before, and he's not as fast. I mean, he has a big brace on his leg, and let's face it, when you come off an ACL and you play the way he played and took some of the hits that he took last year, you're going to be a little bit apprehensive. He does have a good enough arm and a good enough skill set to be a pocket passer. And what made him so dangerous last year was the running attack that they had last year with Morris was unstoppable. So that made the read option and all the other things they did with RG3 that much better. So they need to get the running attack started, and he needs to play a little bit better and play as he does in the second half, in the first half, and get started a lot quicker. Just because he played two tough teams at the beginning of the season. He played Philadelphia, who nobody knew about, but then he played up in Green Bay when they were 0-1. That's two hard games. So let's see what he does this week. As it's his third week, you should see more improvement, and I look for him to make improvement not only this week but every week afterwards for the rest of the season.
Finally, Jay, I want to ask you a question about college football on behalf of our Big Ten fans out there. As a University of Nebraska alumni yourself, what's your take on the profane tirade of Cornhusker head coach Bo Pelini? It was caught on tape about fair-weathered fans and a couple of the local media. Should something like this that happened 2 years ago be concerning? And do you think Nebraska officials were appropriate in taking no disciplinary action against Coach Pelini?
Well, first and foremost, I mean, it definitely was alarming, not the language, but just maybe the content. When you heard somebody saying that, we'll see what they do when I'm gone, it's pretty much throwing it out there that he's the savior of the program and really doesn't want to be here. Those are things that people thought about Bo Pelini for a long time. He's done the right thing. He's came out and apologized, said that he spoke and acted in haste and obviously had an emotional week. So to me, hey, give him a second chance, judge him on wins and losses. It's not that big a deal now that he's taken the right steps to apologize not only to the fans, but all the alumni and administration. I think that the athletic director and the chancellor, they did do the right thing by not disciplining him. If you read it, they said that Coach Osborne, which was the AD at that point in time, addressed it with him and did whatever he had to do as far as disciplinary action with him. So I said, why do it twice? And it was 2 years ago. The timing of the tape and all that stuff being released, I think all played into the decision. I think it's obviously a personal issue that somebody has against Bo Pelini, and that's just something that doesn't need to go on in college football. And so I think Nebraska's trying to move past it, and we'll see how he does for the rest of the year. This is a big year for him personally as a coach and a big year for the university. So everything that they want to do collectively as a team and as an administration is right in front of them. So there's nothing wrong with having a little drama in the beginning of the season. And if you can play well from here on out, it'll all be water underneath the bridge if we can go to the Big Ten championship and win it and go to the BCS bowl game.
Well, that brings a close to this edition of Jay Foreman's All-Out-Blitz. And next week, Jay will be back on VikeFans.com to tell us his reaction to the game versus the Browns and talk about the Vikings' distant home game in London's Wembley Stadium against the Steelers. So until then, I'm Tom Moore.
And I'm Jay Foreman.
See you next week.